4 years ago, people told me that if I came to Saudi Arabia, I would never come back alive. My own sister begged me not to come. She told me, "No, don't go. We hear too many stories. People are dying there." And to be honest, I was afraid too. But I was also a single mother struggling to provide for my children. Life was hard. I looked for opportunities. I tried different things, selling fruits in the street of Nairobi. But no matter how hard I tried, it felt like I was moving in circles. So I found myself facing a difficult choice. Stay where I was and continue struggling, or take a chance on a country that everyone around me was afraid of. I remember telling my sister, "Don't tell our brothers. Don't tell mom. Don't tell dad yet. I will tell them when the time is right." That's how scared I was. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew everyone would try to stop me. And looking back today, sitting here in Saudi Arabia almost 4 years later, I can honestly say that journey changed my life. But getting here wasn't easy. There was fear. There were tears. There were prayers. There were moments when I almost changed my mind. And that's the story I want to share with you today. At that time, life was very difficult for me. As a parent, one of the hardest things is looking at your children and feeling like you cannot give them everything they need. Every day I woke up thinking about how I would make tomorrow better. I wanted a better future. I wanted stability. I wanted to help my family. But opportunities were limited. The more I struggled, the more I realized that if I wanted my life to change, I would have to make a difficult decision. When I first heard about working in Saudi Arabia, I had mixed feelings. On one side, I saw people whose lives had improved after coming here. On the other side, I heard terrible stories. And because of those stories, many people around me believed that coming to Saudi Arabia was too dangerous. My sister was one of those people. She loved me and wanted to protect me. She couldn't understand why I was willing to take the risk. But deep inside, I felt that if I didn't try, I would always wonder what could have been. So I prayed. I prayed a lot. I asked God for guidance. I asked God to protect me. I asked God to show me whether this was the right path. There were days when I felt confident. And there were days when I was completely afraid. I remember when the travel process started. At first, I was excited. Then delays happened. And every delay gave fear another opportunity to enter my mind. I started asking myself questions. What if everyone is right? What if I regret this? What if something happens to me? What if I never see my family again? Those thoughts kept coming. But every time they came, I prayed again. I kept reminding myself why I had started this journey. Eventually, the day arrived. The day I was supposed to leave. I had never traveled abroad before. I had never boarded an airplane before. Everything was new. Everything felt uncertain. I packed my belongings. I packed my clothes. And I packed something very important to me. My Bible. Some people had told me not to carry, but I decided I would carry it anyway. I placed it carefully in my bag and said to myself, I am going with God. That gave me peace. When I arrived at the airport, I was nervous. I didn't know what to expect. Everything felt so big. There were people everywhere. Announcements. Security checks. New procedures. For someone traveling for the first time, it felt overwhelming. But somehow I kept moving forward. One step at a time. When the plane finally took off, I remember looking around and realizing that my life was changing. There was no turning back. I was leaving behind everything familiar and heading toward a future I couldn't see. After arriving in Saudi Arabia, I stayed at the office for a short time. Then I was told that my employer was in another city. I had to travel alone. Imagine that. A woman who had never traveled abroad before, now traveling across a foreign country. I was nervous. But I kept going. Eventually, I met the man who had been sent to pick me up. When I arrived at the house, the family welcomed me. They showed me where I would sleep. They gave me food. They showed me around the house. The next morning, reality began. I was shown many rooms. I remember thinking, wow, this is a lot of work. Everything was new. The machines were new. The routines were new. The expectations were new. I had to learn quickly. At times it was difficult. At times I cried. Sometimes I missed home. Sometimes I missed my children. Sometimes I wondered if I was strong enough. But each day I learned something new. Each day I became stronger. Today, when I look back at the woman who first arrived in Saudi Arabia, I see someone who was afraid. But I also see someone who refused to let fear make the final decision, and that is why I wanted to share this story. Because sometimes fear tells us to stay where we are. Fear tells us not to try. But if we always listen to fear, we may never discover what is possible. Taking that step changed my life. And that's why, almost 4 years later, I'm sitting here sharing my story with you. There are still many stories I haven't told. Stories about culture shock. Stories about lessons I've learned. Stories about challenges, stories about funny moments. And stories about how living in Saudi Arabia has shaped me into the person I am today. If you would like to hear more of those stories, subscribe and join me on this journey. Thank you for listening to my story, and I'll see you in the next video.